After losing the 2024 presidential election, Kamala Harris was seen by many as being the frontrunner for the Democrat nomination for President of the United States in 2028. But a lot has changed since she lost her election in 2024. And today we are going to be looking at the 2028 presidential primary election. This will be a prediction video for every single state. So as of right now, on the Democrat side, Kamala Harris does lead the Democrat field with roughly 21% of the vote share. Now, ultimately, this far out from an election, we know most of these polls are based on name recognition, not necessarily who someone likes or who they would vote for. It's more based on name recognition. With all candidates in the race, Kamala Harris comes in at 21% average in the race to the White House aggregate. Pete Buttigieg, 4 points behind at 17.5%. AOC coming in at roughly 12%. Gavin Newsom at almost 13%. And Tim Walz coming in roughly at 5%. Those are the only candidates that are breaking 5% as of right now in the race to the White House aggregate polling. Now, in a poll without Kamala Harris would not be in this election. Pete Buttigieg is clearly the favorite between Buttigieg, Gavin Newsom, and surprisingly, AOC and Tim Walz. Those four are the top picks for Democrat primary voters in 2028 if Kamala Harris is not on the ballot. This is a very sad point to be. Someone who is an attorney general from the most populous state in America. They were a senator from the most populous state in America. They were vice president of the United States and also was the 2024 presidential nominee for the Democrat Party. Yet with all that name recognition, all of that resume, she is only pulling one out of every 5 Democrat primary voters as of right now. And clearly, we've had multiple polls taken recently. Atlas Intel clearly showing Pete Buttigieg with a lead of 26 points over Kamala Harris's 14%. In this most recent Atlas Intel poll, Kamala Harris falls to 4th place in this poll. Pete Buttigieg comes in first, AOC in second, Gavin Newsom in second, and Kamala Harris in 4th. Gavin Newsom in 3rd, 2nd, 1st. I've got something going on. Obviously, Democrat primary voters do not believe that Kamala Harris will be the best nominee in 2028. If they did, it would look something more like what the Republican primary looks like right now, where you have incumbent Vice President and former Senator J.D. Vance pulling roughly 49% of the vote. In the most recent poll, J.D. Vance pulled 57.9%, coming in second place. Governor of the state of Florida, Ron DeSantis, who we do expect will launch a bid. And then, of course, Marco Rubio, incumbent Secretary of State, former senator from the state of Florida. Obviously, big names in the Trump orbit that we are looking at here. J.D. Vance pulling out with 49%, just under 1 in every 2 Republican primary voters will vote for J.D. Vance in the 2028 election. Now, if you're looking at the bet-in markets, the bet-in markets are very clear as well, but a little different on the Democrat side. Clearly, J.D. Vance holds a commanding lead in the Republican presidential nomination process, with roughly a 56% chance of being the nominee in 2028. Right behind him is Marco Rubio at 7%, Donald Trump Jr. at 5%, Donald Trump at 5%, Ron DeSantis at 5%. You also have Glenn Youngkin at 4%, Tulsi Gabbard, soon to be most likely Governor of Ohio, Vivek Ramaswamy at 2%, and a lot of other people down below that. On the Democrat side is a much different picture than you would expect. Looking at the primary, you see Gavin Newsom is clearly number 3 in this race. 1, 2, 3, and it's close with AOC. But look at this right now. In the polling markets or in the bet-in markets right now, 21%, Gavin Newsom has a 21% chance to be the Democrat nominee in 2028. He is just ahead of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at 17%. Former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg at 13%, Governor of the state of Pennsylvania at 6%, and Hunter Biden at 1%. Why is he up here? That is so weird. Wes Moore has a higher chance than Kamala Harris. Josh Shapiro has a better chance than Kamala Harris. With Gretchen Whitmer, John Ossoff, Andy Beshear, Michelle Obama, J.B. Pritzker, Raphael Warnock, and a lot of other Democrats that could potentially jump in this race. One to look out for. I wonder if we see Satan herself on here? There she is. Hillary Rodham Clinton, maybe? Maybe she'll be the nominee. Maybe this is Hillary Clinton waiting for her opportunity, waiting for this vacuum at the top of the ticket. For this is the perfect place where Hillary Clinton just slithers right in to the top of the ticket right here. But ultimately, this is where the betting markets have it right now. They believe Gavin Newsom will be the nominee in 2028. But the real question is never about who is going to win the Democrat primary. It's whether that person who wins the Democrat primary can win in a general election. That is the big question. And that's why today we are going to be looking at this presidential map, filling out for the Republicans and the Democrats in this election. Now, for the Democrats, of course, the Democrat stronghold states of Washington, Oregon, California, and Hawaii will all go to the Democrat Party in 2028, along with Colorado, Illinois, the state of Vermont, Maine's first congressional district included in there, Connecticut, New Jersey. Well, New Jersey, we're going to hold off for a second. We're going to look at Delaware, Maryland, the District of Columbia, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts will all be Democrat strongholds going into the 2028 presidential election. Now, for the Republican Party, they have a lot of stronghold states, starting with the state of Utah, Idaho, Wyoming. We could go through and list every single one of these out, but for right now, we're not going to. We're just going to go through. These are all the states that will most likely vote for the Republican Party in 2028 that are safe seats. This is not even questionable. And of course, including the state of Florida, the state of Missouri will also be included in this election. And this leaves us with, and I'm going to include Kansas in there and Alaska. This leaves us with our more competitive, and I should say Nebraska at large. This will leave us with our more competitive races. Republicans currently have 194 electoral votes in this prediction to Democrats 149. Now let's talk about the likely seats. Seats that will likely go to the Democrat Party, like the state of New Mexico. Maine at large will go to the Democrat Party, at least by a 5 to 10 point margin. We also will include in there the state of New York, the state of New Jersey, the state of Virginia will all be included in the likely states that will vote for the Democrat Party in 2028. Now, for the Republican Party, the likely seats, you're looking at places like Ohio, like Iowa, very, very likely that they will vote for the Republican Party, along with Maine's 2nd congressional district will be included. Nebraska's 1st congressional district will be included in that as well. And this leaves us with really our competitive seats going into 2028. So for the lean seats for the Democrat Party, we'll look at Minnesota. Nebraska's 2nd congressional district will be included. New Hampshire will be included under that title, which leaves us with the same 8 toss-up states. I should say 7 toss-up states going into the 2028 presidential election. And this is where it really matters. This is where it really matters on who gets the nomination. Who is the nominee? I think it's a very different picture if you talk about Pete Buttigieg. If Pete Buttigieg is at the top of the ticket, and we're going to assume for right now that J.D. Vance is at the top of the ticket. If it is J.D. Vance versus Pete Buttigieg, I have a very hard time seeing Buttigieg winning in the Rust Belt states, or I should say the Sun Belt states. The Rust Belt states, I agree as well. Nevada and Arizona, I believe, will go to the Republicans by a safe, lean margin if Buttigieg is at the top of the ticket. I believe Georgia will as well, simply for the fact that even when Pete Buttigieg is leading in a Democrat primary poll, like this poll right here, with Echelon Insights or Emerson College, Pete Buttigieg consistently polls at 0% support among African Americans, and even, I wish you could say less support, but double or single digit support for the Hispanic community or minority communities, which we know that is a bedrock of the Democrat Party. If we all of a sudden saw African-American voter turnout decreased by 10% because Pete Buttigieg was at the top of the ticket for the Democrat Party, I see Georgia going to the Republican Party, North Carolina, 2 states that have large populations of African-Americans, along with Pennsylvania, which is a large African-American population. I believe you would see places like California, like Oregon, get closer. Colorado could get closer. New Mexico could get closer. New York could get closer. New Hampshire would most likely get a lot closer. I believe those would be very competitive, along with Illinois, if you saw even a 5 or 10% turnout or decrease in turnout among African Americans. Now, I do believe that Buttigieg would not be completely swept here. I go back and forth. I believe he would win. I believe these are very, very close elections that you're looking at right here. Whether is it Michigan by a point, Wisconsin by a point, what is it? But it is very, very likely in my mind that Buttigieg could be swept out of office or swept as the nominee. Just a terrible, terrible showing for someone like Pete Buttigieg. But let's go back and pretend Buttigieg is not the nominee. And you aren't going to see a decrease in African-American turnout in states like Georgia, like North Carolina, like Pennsylvania, like Michigan, like Wisconsin. We go back to New Hampshire. We reset this. If you see someone in this election, someone more like a Josh Shapiro, I believe Josh Shapiro would be very, very good. I believe Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, and Gavin Newsom would all lose. If you're looking at a map, I do believe Newsom would perform better. I don't think he would perform well in Nevada or Arizona by any means. I do not by any means. Do I think Georgia could be a little closer if Newsom is on the top of the ticket? Absolutely, but I still believe Republicans would win, as there is a personality, a persona of this elitist mentality, this West Coast elitist mentality that really Gavin Newsom cannot shake. He is trying to rebrand himself as a moderate, as someone who's down the middle, who didn't absolutely destroy the state of California, but he's struggling. I think these toss-up races would be a lot closer, but at the end of the day, I still believe J.D. Vance would win Georgia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania, delivering a major victory for the Republican Party. Even if they didn't win in Arizona or Nevada, this is a massive victory. I believe that J.D. Vance would win these if Newsom is on the ticket. Now, could I see Wisconsin, even Michigan, going to Gavin Newsom, and Nevada and Arizona going to J.D. Vance? I could see that happening. I could see Wisconsin going to Gavin Newsom, but at the same time, I could also see it going to J.D. Vance. I think it's going to be very, very close, but it's going to come down to these. But if you see someone that's more like a Josh Shapiro, who's at the top of the ticket, I believe Republicans would be in trouble. I think they'd be in trouble. Josh Shapiro is very popular among the African American community, and I believe that Democrats would win the state of Pennsylvania, maybe even by more than a point. I believe that in places like Georgia, Josh Shapiro would win in a state like Georgia narrowly. Republicans, I believe, would still win in North Carolina, in Arizona, in Nevada. Ultimately, I still think that Josh Shapiro would perform well. I think it'd be much closer in Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin. But still, I could very much see a world in which he wins the Rust Belt states right here and wins the presidency. I could 100% see that happening. I also, in a strange world, could see him winning in places like North Carolina with a heavily African-American community. Even if Republicans held on to Wisconsin and Michigan, it would be no match for Josh Shapiro's dominance when it came to his support with minorities and just how really good he is in the modern Democrat Party. But as of right now, I believe there are very few people who could win as a Democrat in 2028 against J.D. Vance. I think AOC, if AOC was at the top of the ticket, I believe AOC would get blown out to the likes of which we have never seen before. It would be so close. I could even see New Hampshire voting for the Republican Party. You could see it get a lot closer in some of these more New England areas. Could you see some place like Minnesota trending a little bit more to the middle? But ultimately, when you were looking at this, the Democrat primary right now, Buttigieg appears to be the guy if Kamala Harris is not the guy. And I think if Kamala Harris is at the top of the ticket, it would be just as bad. I think the best shot that they have is a Gavin Newsom, a Josh Shapiro. I think Newsom would be terrible. I think Shapiro would be the best they could really possibly do in this election as of right now. I think it would be very, very detrimental to nominate AOC, Kamala Harris, or even Pete Buttigieg again. We saw what happened in 2024, a great year for the Republican Party, a massive sweep of the swing states, and I could 100% see that happening again. But ultimately, the primaries are going to determine the general election. They will. These are the states where you need to be competitive. So the big question, how will Democrats go? What will they do? Will Democrats decide to nominate someone as far left, as radical as they possibly can? Or will they decide, you know what, we want to win? And how will Republicans go? Do you think support will stick with the Republican Party and J.D. Vance? Do you think someone like a Ron DeSantis or a Marco Rubio could emerge? I think a lot of it has to do with the endorsement of Donald Trump. Who does Donald Trump endorse in this upcoming election? I believe that will be a very, very big key of who gets the nod in 2028. But folks, that is going to wrap things up for today. As always, drop down below, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you never miss another video from us again in the future. And folks, we will catch you next time.